presenting my identities.
Hello, my name is Georg Weitauer, or Georg, George, whatever you want. Just don't try to pronounce my last name. It's not worth it. My PUL is on my identities, and I would like to talk about 3 major identities I have discovered or challenged throughout this trip. And I will start with talking about my academic identity, which is quite old and developed, and I'm really comfortable talking about it. Later, I will talk about my organic identity, which is quite new, developed on this trip, and I'm really passionate about this one. So because it's so radical, I'm a little less comfortable talking about it, but I will. And the last one is my being the German term I will describe and translate later. It's the newest. I thought about that one probably a month ago. I started about thinking that one. And it's the one I'm the least comfortable with, but willing to share. So my academic path is quite alternative. I never went to a public high school. I went to a Waldorf school, which is the alternative way of education in Germany. The goal of the Waldorf school is to develop free, morally responsible individuals with a high degree of social competence and creativity. To reach that goal, we have additional subjects: arts, theater, choir, gardening, and a lot of hand-on crafts. We have teachers over 7 years to create a better relationship, that our teachers can understand our learning process better and be first in that process. We are not graded until 9th grade, and we cannot repeat classes, because the idea behind that one is that everyone is learning at a different speed. So if you let someone repeat the class, it's just because he learned slower. And the belief of the Waldorf school is to give everyone the chance to learn at the same, or the individual speed. Even though I went to a Waldorf school, I was really academic focused, and I had one main goal in high school, and that was becoming rich. And to reach that goal, I valued my grades as the resource, and I valued, or the resource for that grade is formal education. So I associated my good grades with my future being successful and rich. I always wanted to be an agent of change at some point, and I had that belief that if I'm rich, I just can buy the part of the rainforest or old gold mines and protect them from companies. I figured out that's not the way to go. In that value or end goal of becoming rich, I had to hold certain characteristics to achieve that goal. And there are some that I'm proud of, and there are some that I want to challenge and tackle for the future. To be really successful, I had to be highly competitive with my students and even with my friends. And I see that one not as a bad value itself, but if you put that in the same category than selfishness, being egocentric, then it becomes a pretty bad value. I never shared any academic work with my friends, because I thought that if I would share something, I will widen the competitive field, and that will make it hard for me to be the best. I want to be the best in everything I try. So I just never started sharing anything. There are values I associate with the positive intent, and that is being disciplined, and I'm really good at self-motivation. And I still hold these values today, but the view I look on formal education and my competitiveness changed. I saw non-formal education of distracting yourself from becoming academically successful. Now, after TBB, I think that non-formal education is a greater resource to pursue personal success. From a future to find a university that has a kind of alternative path for me to continue that alternative education throughout my life. In my competitiveness, I was very judgmental towards people who didn't put the same effort in academics than I did. I valued and judged people by their academic success and their grades, and I burned bridges to people and relationships because I didn't share the same values. I will talk about that later when I come to my social identity. My academic identity is something that is pretty developed and didn't change so radically. And I didn't work on that really intentional, but throughout TBB, my values changed. But I would like to share more about my organic identity because that's something I'm really passionate about. So to give you a little bit about my past again, I grew up with parents who hold organic food as one of the key values in life. My mom has a master's degree in agriculture, founded and worked on a farm for several years. And my father is a gardening teacher in a Waldorf school. I grew up next to 4 organic farms in a 5-minute radius. I lived part of my life on a semi-organic farm. We had a garden, and the organic farm was 1 minute away. In my childhood, I spent a lot of times on organic farms in general, and I had many friends who lived on organic farms. My parents tried hard to establish that belief and that value in me, and I think they did a good job until I became a teenager. At that point, I discovered a new identity: fitness and bodybuilding. And as deeper as I got into that identity, I had to think about food in a new way. I thought about food as something really nutritious. I didn't look, when I went to the grocery store, I didn't look at the organic label. I searched for the product that had the most protein on 100 grams because my goal was muscle growth. And I disconnected with organic agriculture and the question around how to consume sustainably in a pretty radical way. And until TBB, I never questioned that lifestyle. But when we first arrived in Dongjang, a southern village in Thailand, and worked and lived within organic families and unorganic farms, I had to face those questions again. I pushed those questions away for a really long time because I knew that my food lifestyle was not sustainable at all. But I believed in that lifestyle and hold it as a key value. And I knew if I will put research into that, I have to face that my consumption is not sustainable at all. So I never researched until I came to that village. And I saw the organic cycle and how positive it is and how it works. I saw the farmers working on their farm, producing food for themselves and selling the rest on the market, and creating an organic cycle that was positive in itself. Didn't need to loan money from the bank for the next harvest. They were able to eat and grow their food throughout the year, and they didn't need to buy any food from the market if they didn't want to. I had to face those questions again, how do I consume sustainably? And I realized pretty quickly that the way I looked at food before TBB cannot be the way I look at food after TBB. Because I saw that chemical agriculture does not work even on a 1 hectare farm, and that means it won't work on a bigger farm anyway. And I became really passionate about organic agriculture. Now I believe that organic agriculture is the future of our agriculture system. And I had to ask myself the question, can organic agriculture feed the world? Can farmers earn a sustainable living on sustainable agriculture? And even though we read negative sides on that, I strongly believe that it is possible. And I have goals for myself I want to hold in the future. I want to visit the organic local farms next to my house and validate their standard, how they treat their animals, and see if they align with my standards I hold right now and if they don't, these standards are really high. And talking to the alumni in the morning, I realized that it will be really challenging keeping those standards and holding myself accountable for the change I want to make. It's not only difficult for myself, it is difficult in a social way because I will face friends who do not believe that organic agriculture is the future and who kind of want the protein George bag because they probably see me as organic hippie and do not want to have a conversation about organic food whenever we go to a restaurant. So there is a social fear that I have right now to be misunderstood and assumptions being made on my new belief. But when I get home, I will try, and if you're interested, I will keep you updated on how. I want to talk now about being a Sozialer. I want to use the German term because it implies more than just being, if you talk about the social in America or in the American language, you associate that with someone who is engaging with others, who has the capacity to easily talk to people. In Germany, that word has a different root. It implies that you are thoughtful and helpful to others, that you're aware and conscious about the actions you do and the effects it will have on your group or the people you're in contact with. It comes from a social worker, and that has a different meaning. That's why I'm using it. I might use social identity in the future of that presentation. So whenever I say it, please remind yourselves that I talk about someone who is that conscious in the environment he's in. I never really developed a Sozialer identity. I would say social because it's easier for me. Because next to my academic identity, I wasn't only competitive with friends, I was competitive with myself and the identities I hold. I thought that if I develop a social identity, that will weaken my academic identity and that will be hurtful for my end goal. If you ask friends, they will tell you that they wouldn't associate me with being social. I only have few examples of me discovering my social side, and that was when I was a tutor for free for my step-sibling, one of my step-siblings here. For 1 year, I was a tutor for both of my step-siblings. and I worked at a kids camp, so there is something in me that wants to come out. And through TPP, I discovered more of my social identity. And one topic that I want to talk about is toxic masculinity. I will explain it later. Or I will tell you my personal definition. I think that there's always a patriarchy of being manly. And I thought that being the manliest is showing no emotions, showing no weakness, not being vulnerable, being strong, being muscular, being tall, being able to control people and have a leadership role. I associated with being more feminine with having no muscles, being small, being emotional, and showing vulnerability. And I personally think there's nothing wrong with that patriarchy until you judge people for being less manly. And I tell you, I was that person who judged people for being less manly. And I started to think about that topic a month ago. So this is something that is quite new to me. And I'm not an expert on that. I'll just share my process in that field. Why is it so difficult to talk about toxic masculinity? Personally, I'm 6'4", I weigh 210 pounds, and I love fitness. So even if I don't talk, some people probably associate me with toxic masculinity. So it's especially for me difficult because I have to be double aware of what I say, because it is easier for people to take it the wrong way. I will share with you one example that happened a week ago, and that can be a good example for my process I'm going to. I did something in the reflection week in Virginia that was an action that objectified basically all the women in our group in a bad way. I wasn't aware of that because people were laughing and I thought it's just something normal until one of the students called me out. And I thought, okay, that's a great way to start. I'm working on toxic masculinity right now. So I went into my room and I started journaling about what I did. And I journaled for 30 minutes. And at the end, I reread everything I wrote, and there was something wrong. And all I wrote was arguments that justified my action. I came up with probably 10 arguments that I wanted to tell the person who called me out to say it wasn't my fault. I did something, but you never told me that's wrong until it was over and people felt hurt. And then I realized that after that long process of reflection on my toxic masculinity in my past, that's not the way to go. And what I realized is that the most difficult part of toxic masculinity is not to accept that it's there, but you have to stop justifying it for yourself. And in that moment, I sat on my bed and I was probably the angriest at myself that I've been for many years, because I realized that all I did in the past was wrong, and that it would not align, or it's not aligning with my goal of becoming the best version of myself. That is one main goal I hold for myself. But I realized that all I did in the past was so far away from that goal. And it was hurtful because being in that process and just talking about it sometimes feels easy. But if you're at that point where you realize that you were so far away from your goal, you're hurt. And to talk about someone with that feeling, especially males, is tough. Because you have to share vulnerability, you have to share your emotions, and people associate with you being not manly. Then I asked myself the question, why do I have toxic masculinity? And I thought about it, or I've reflected on the friend group I was in. And being toxic masculine gives you a certain status. Everyone wants status. And pursuing toxic masculinity can give you that status in a negative way. And with status, there comes respect. And with respect, there comes power. And I only know a few males who do not want to have a certain amount of power. But you can pursue that power in two ways: being toxic masculine or not being toxic masculine. And what I found out is that there were many people in the group who became huge role models for me because I saw them and I respected them and they had power in the group without being toxic masculine. And some of them are not here yet, they're in a different room, but I will thank them later for being that role model and making me conscious about my toxic masculinity. And that is something I really want to work on in the future. It's probably a really tough topic to face with old friends, to face with families and have that discussion. But it's something I'm passionate about, and I think the respect I get from being less toxic masculine is a better respect than pursuing toxic masculinity. questions. Yeah.
Do you think that you can still pursue your goal of being rich, however you define that, and not be toxically masculine?
Yeah, there are two ways I look at my end goal now. In terms of my organic identity and in the terms of my toxic masculinity. I think that there is the perception that being rich is something that you should be. If you want to be a successful male, you need to be rich. And I think within my toxic masculinity, I always thought about that, and I never questioned that. Because I was toxic masculine, so being rich made totally sense. Being in that organic farm connected me to my future in a different way, because I realized that organic agriculture is something I really, really like and I'm passionate about. So I had that idea of becoming a chef and connect my restaurant to an organic farm. Right now, I'm still in that uncomfortable zone of having those two beliefs. Going into business and probably making a lot of money, or following your passion right now. And when I get back, I have to choose a university and I have to make that decision. But right now, I'm not able to make it. I probably need some more reflection.
On that vein, like, what are you going to do on a daily basis to promote like the goals that you want to do? Because I like after I went on to UVA, I also felt like that I needed to like do something like every day and like enact my change. So how do you feel like you're going to do that, or like how do you want to?
Yeah, right now it's quite easy because I have time resources, I have money resources, and I have the environment resource because I'm still living with my family. They buying the food, so if I want to go full organic, there's probably a big support from especially my mother. And there is the time because college starts in September, but there will be a point when I'm going to college where it will be really difficult because I will have a job and then I have to decide, do I use that money to buy me a, I don't know, new laptop, or do I spend all that money on just buying the organic version of the food I eat? And I thought about this a lot and how that might disconnect me socially with my friends because I pursue a hobby that is so vastly different from the things you normally do in college. But I hope that I can be more conscious about the food I eat. I will do the meat thing. I will go to the farms and check it out. If that means that I consume meat once a week, I will make that experiment, I would call it right now. And I have a great passion to bake my own bread. So that's some small scale changes I want to make.
Going off what Jenny just said, relating to the toxic masculinity that you were just talking about, do you have any steps like taking that back home?
Yeah. There are two really tough things I'm facing. A, I'm not in an environment or in a group that is supportive in the change you want to make and the things you want to work on. And I will get back to my old friend groups. And you don't want to be that guy who's calling out every situation or every action, because that will disconnect you to your friends. And I also want to be less judgmental towards people and their beliefs. So it's a really tough balance to make people aware of that and might have that conversation, but not being that guy who's calling out everyone for being such toxic masculine and judging people for being more feminine. But that's something that I have to experiment on, and we'll see how that works. Yes?
Being rich is probably the most prominent example of success, but as we all know, there are many other measurements of success. Is that in your horizon to try to maybe redefine or modulate?
Yeah, I do not have that goal that I had in high school with just becoming rich at some point. I want to connect it to a passion. And if I connect it to the passion of becoming a chef, that means that probably I won't be super rich. But there are other passions I have that goes more in renewable energy sources. Great resource for being rich, but also doing something that will help and change the world at some point. So yeah, I have to figure out that decision, which I'm not happy about. Yeah.
You talk about toxic masculinity and how it affects other people, and how in that situation how you felt that it hurt other people. Does the opposite? Do you feel renewed somehow? Are you excited about not having that toxic masculinity, or is it does it feel weakening, feminizing? Does it put you in a place that feels uncomfortable, or does it make you feel excited?
I think there are two perspectives on that question. It totally puts me in a position of being uncomfortable at any point, even like talking about it makes me uncomfortable. Even talking to my mentor about it is, to a certain point, uncomfortable. But there is something I'm really excited about, that is feeling the respect from people without getting the respect within toxic masculine actions. And I'm looking forward to that point where I first feel this kind of respect without associating with my toxic masculine actions. And that is something that's keeping me going.
Regarding your desire to be a chef with an organic-based restaurant, I invite you to come to Seattle and Portland. And also, I think your new discovery about the balance of feminine and masculine will make you a much better husband and a much better father, and a greater capacity for love. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really young identity. I would say at the start of discovering that more, which makes it more difficult. But thank you for your invitation. I will come to Seattle.
Tom Douglas is rich as a
Everyone's pulling you to their state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to remind you that showing vulnerability is strength.
Going off of that, I think it was so cool and so powerful that you were able to be vulnerable with us about sort of like starting to unpack toxic masculinity and like I think that's
Thank you.
I have questions sort of for everyone that went on to this year. But how do you guys think, and like you guys also as an international student, how do you guys think like the Trump election and like Trump's toxic masculinity affected your trip, and how you guys like I don't know, experience being agents of change, experience being abroad? Do you think it affected your trip?
Personally, American, but I think it is hurtful for that movement because cultures all around the world, and we travel to, associate toxic masculinity at the level of being a president of a really big country as something that is okay. And that really hurts that movement against toxic masculinity. And that's how I would say it would have affects the world on a global scale.
For time, I think we need to end the session now and say thank you to Georg.